Excited to be here. That's great. Thank you so much. It's Tuesday, March 9th, and this is the regular meeting of the Fargo Board of Education. So just calling the meeting to order. Is there a motion for approval of the agenda? Jim?
I move adoption of the agenda as provided with the HR addendum added to item 6B that was at our work locations.
There's a second?
I will second that.
All right, thank you. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We have a performance tonight from some students from Davies, the Davies Jazz Trio. First live music maybe that many of us have seen in a long time. I know myself. I don't think I've been out to see anything since, probably since around March, a year ago. So Ainsley Renfro, you are going to do the introductions?
Sure.
Welcome.
Thank you. March is officially Music in Our Schools Month. So we like to celebrate our incredibly strong music program in Fargo Public Schools, recognize the dedicated music teachers, and of course, thank Fargo Public Schools and the board for supporting our music program. So I'm excited to talk more about that on the 23rd meeting, but tonight I want to introduce a jazz trio from Davies High School. Emily Gao is a senior at Davies. She's on the keyboard. Aiden Huck is a junior at Davies on the drums. Owen Beller is also a junior at Davies on guitar. And they have formed their own jazz trio, and they go and perform out in Fargo and the area. They are called the Safe Space Jazz Trio. So they are going to be playing Strayhorn's Take the A Train tonight, and afterwards they'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any for them. So I would like to thank Emily and Aiden and Owen. I'd also like to thank Mr. Brandenburg, their jazz teacher over at Davies. Thank you for organizing this great performance. So with that, here is Take the A Train.
Hey, where's the mic? There you go. Whew, that was great.
Hold it, if we do like lighters.
Right, like we have our phones. Hold the flashlight up. That was awesome, you guys. Oh man, I wish we started a meeting like that every time. So, I don't know, we should have been up dancing. I was dancing in my seat, I know. Okay, comments from board members. Comments, questions, anyone? Nikki?
I bet I need to use this. Okay, there we go. Gosh, that was great, you guys. Thank you. I'm with Rebecca every time. Let's just open it every time this way. Thank you so much for coming tonight. How long have you all been playing together?
Yeah, we've been playing for around a year and a half.
Wow.
We initially started to do like a kind of teacher meeting. A benefit, that's the word I'm looking for. But yeah, Mr. Brandenburg put us together and we played for the benefit, and then we're like, hey, this is fun, we should do it more. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I think if we could put a little wine together and a little jazz, we'd have quite an evening there. So thank you very much. Loved it.
Robin?
Oh, I can't help myself. Thank you, guys. You have a groupie in the audience. He smelled jazz from across the street. So Ashley, or Ainsley mentioned you guys have gigs that you go out and you book, which is part of being a jazz musician, I've learned. Tell me about some of the places that you do your gigs.
All right. So yeah, after the benefit, we kind of just started like talking to businesses. None of us really had much experience, getting jobs, like approaching these business owners. It's kind of a scary thing, but I think we were so passionate about like playing that we really just wanted to get out there and do as much as we could. And we asked around, and some people, they let us play. We played at 46 North. It's a restaurant downtown. We've also have played at the Red River Market a few times, and then we've played at a couple school events as well. So COVID came around, kind of put an end to that for a little bit. Hopefully we can get back out there and do more summer stuff though.
So not only is it music, it's business education.
Yeah, for sure. we,
Right?
Yeah, we learned a lot about that stuff. Negotiating rates and stuff.
Oh, thank you, guys. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Dr. Gandhi?
I think I just want to start by saying thank you to the students, and then, of course, our teacher and all of our support staff as well. As we talk about Fargo Public Schools, 15 years running has been recognized as a national leading school district with performance arts recognition, and this is a prime example of why. So I think Board President Knudsen started the meeting right. Well, this is probably the first live music experience many of us have probably had in almost a year. And just the attitude and the environment in the room talks about your performance and the impact that music can have. So thank you, and thank you very much as well. So.
Seth?
Well done. Just on the business part of it, as a working musician, I would just like to give you a bit of advice. Never, ever forget that nothing hurts your worth like free work.
So they're getting paid for this?
Yes.
I'm sure there's a contract somewhere. Do you have any gigs lined up, or are you waiting to build that list now that COVID's kind of freed you up a little bit?
Yeah, so we have the go-to, I guess, has been the Red River Market, since it's pretty accessible. It's relatively safe because most restaurants are kind of not seating, or at least like really nice sit-down ones aren't really seating inside as much. So our best bet usually is to play outside if we can. And that's just like the most prominent opportunity, I guess. They have a great marketing team who are they're very professional. very willing to take a chance on a bunch of teenagers. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of just what we go for right now is outdoor stuff. And they have mentioned like maybe bringing us back this summer, so that's hopefully what we'll do.
Cool. Do you have a Facebook page or I don't even, what would be appropriate for social media for us to be able to find out maybe where you're performing down the road?
Yeah, we have an Instagram at Safe Space Fargo, and we put clips on there, and we put our set list and where we're going to be performing next, so you should follow.
Nice. Very, very fun. Anyone else have anything else to add? Okay, I think we're all just really blown away and super happy to see you tonight, and maybe short on words, but thank you so, so much for your time and for your dedication, and best of luck to you. Have a great evening. And we're going to take a quick break while they tear down, so if anyone needs to get up and move around now, feel free. You have signed up to speak with us this evening, so welcome. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and address for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond or to debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, you will be allotted a maximum of 4 minutes. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound and the speaker is asked, will be asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of your time at the podium. And Victoria, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's on. Sorry, I ruined your music fun. Now it's time for business. My name is Victoria Johnson. Many of you guys know me. I have a concern, too. On January 26th, the Fargo Public School talk about how to incorporate and bring diverse teachers within their school. Fargo Public School had that opportunity. During the hiring process for the middle school that's current open and it's already been filled, there were 17 candidates who applied for that position. 2 were minority. 1 met the Fargo Public School requirement to be able to be given that position if Fargo Public School choose to. But that individual candidate did not even get an interview because that person did not pass the Fargo Public School scoring requirement. And this is the information I received from the Fargo Public School because I was curious. What is said in front of the public and what Fargo Public School does behind closed doors, it's always 2 separate things. It's never what it's said. It's what's done behind closed doors. In my opinion, that scoring requirement, it's a bias. It's a bias. You cannot sit here and say you are looking to hire a diverse individual within your school district and you have that opportunity. You had 17 candidates, only 2 applied. But you did not give that opportunity to that person who has the requirement, the degree to be able to perform that job. So that is a huge concern with me. And I requested the scoring. I asked the Fargo Public School, I wanted to see the scoring requirement that individual did not meet. And I was sent, and you guys can ask for that. I didn't print any copies for you guys, so I was sent that. And I was looking at it. It was really surprising when I was looking at it. The only person who will get an interview based on this scoring system, it's only if they're vets. If they're vet, they can get an interview and don't have to do this. What happened to the minority? What happened to the Native American? Because there was 1 Native American and 1 Black who applied for that position out of that 17, but the job is given to a person who was within Fargo Public School, a current employee. That's my biggest concern. My second concern, Fargo Public School in 2019 introduced a trauma-informed care opponent, which they called the Ukeru system. It was introduced to the Fargo Public School Board. You voted for it. Well, guess what? We had a meeting. My organization came and had a meeting with Fargo Public School, and we asked, did the Ukeru system really did work? Did you see a number decrease in restraint and seclusion for those children with disability within Fargo Public School? Guess what the response was? Yes, we saw a decrease based on the data. I didn't believe that because I have been in the Fargo Public School for so long and I know exactly what is presented and what is done is 2 different things. So about a week ago, I decided to ask for the data to support that claim. Well, guess what? To my surprise, there was no data. There was no data to prove that Ukeru system that was used as a component of trauma-informed care has actually been used because there was no data. So that's something you guys really has to pay attention to. What is getting presented to you and what is getting done?
Thank you, Victoria. I have the feeling you might have had more that you wanted to share with us. If you do, feel free to, reach us on email or certainly feel free to give me a call. Thank you. Thank you for being here. On to the reports section of the agenda. The first item is STEAM monitoring, visual arts, and Dr. Gandhi, you are going to be introducing.
Yes, for our STEAM monitoring report of the visual arts, our high school art teachers this year, they got together at a PLC and they wanted to represent all 3 schools, and they decided at their PLC the best way to do it was to put together a board video for the board presentation. So I think that is what Mr. Westrick is loading up, and that is the introduction to that presentation.
I'm making a fountain out of clay. This is the sketch I'm basing it off of. It's like a 3-tier fountain. So there'll be 3 levels and different sizes bowls, and then I'll be filling the inside with pennies, so it's kind of like a wish fountain type thing. And then for the bowls, I threw these on the wheel, and I have 3 different sizes of them. And then for the slabs that they're going to be sitting on, these are built out of slabs for the platforms. And then once everything is complete, they'll be sitting like a 3-tier fountain. So it'll look something like that. This is my piece, Nighttime in New York. What I did was I overlaid this original piece outside of the New York City Library with other photo of mine from the stars. And then with this piece, I did a mock product shoot and I used this light box, and it took about 2 days. And so I just did a photo shoot like you would on a website.
I am Aiden. This is my oil landscape. I took it right outside at the parking lot at North on a sunsetty day.
This is my oil landscape. I took it at a tree farm in North Dakota.
Hi, I'm Oliver. I'm painting an oil painting of Portrait of a Dove, parody painting, substituting her for my dog Bogart, and I'm doing it with oil paint.
So today I'm working on my iPad. We're working on developing different textures, making them realistic. So when we start working on our character designs, we're able to make the character, different elements, and the environment more realistic. Right. So this is my mixed media sketchbook, and this page is supposed to kind of show the way people are divided into two, not really ever coming together, because you can see light is to the bad guy to the darkness, but then darkness is the bad guy to the light. There's no right or wrong answer. People are always divided.
I figured out the idea of this design, and the medium I used was screen printing. So I went into a dark room and used emulsion and put that on a silk screen. And the next day I came back and I printed a clear photo of my design and burned it onto the screen and then rinsed that out. And then I went in with the ink and I used 2 different screens for the butterfly and the body. And yeah, after that, just cleaned it.
Hey guys, I'm Trevor Dahl. I'm a junior at Davies High School. I'm currently in advanced clay in sculpture. I love it a lot. This is one of my recent pieces that I've made. I really like clay a lot, probably because it lets me express who I am. And just like, it's a lot of fun just to get your hands dirty and stuff and get out of like the basics, like writing on paper and pencil like my other classes. I also love it just because the environment in clay classes are so fun and I love all my classmates. Thank you.
Okay, so here at South High, we try to offer assignments that are not only fun, but extremely challenging. We're offering opportunities to be creative. After all, creativity is the currency of the 21st century.
Here at Fargo South, the art room is a place where you can come and be yourself. We really focus on critical thinking and creative thinking, and it's just a very welcoming environment where you don't have to have fear. You can really utilize all the tools and materials and be as creative and imaginative as possible.
I really like the environment of the art department. Everybody's really fun and accepting, and it's a really good way to get some stress out. When I'm having a bad day, I can come in and just work.
The environment in art is just very accepting and calming and just a good way to cope with everything. Being able to vent whatever you need to do or to just draw something silly or something sad. I don't know, it's just a good way to vent.
Art is not only my passion, it's what kind of got me through high school, because in high school you find your different areas and what you're good at, and art just was what I was passionate for the most.
Art has influenced my creativity. Art has broadened my horizons in life. Art has made me a better person. My art teacher has made me a better person. So yeah.
Art is a way for me to challenge myself. I enjoy trying new things, learning new techniques, but also honing my skills on what I'm good at.
For me, art is a way to express my ideas and my thoughts, to get them down on paper, to give a visualization of my thoughts and things like that. And I love it. I'm very connected to art and the things I draw and paint and things like that.
The art department is great. I get to learn a lot about art history and art theory, and I think the expertise of both Ms. Johnson and Mr. Glasheen are very high, so it's a very enriching program to be part of.
Wow, where are all these students? We'd like to visit with them.
So knowing that there were a couple of scheduling conflicts and all three high school art teachers wanted to be represented and making sure that all high schools were represented, they decided to put together a video today as a part of the strategic plan results report, just so they felt that they can highlight a wide variety of different mediums and actually showcase some student work in a broader lens. And obviously we know that the art departments throughout the district at all levels have been contributing to some of the decor that we have in the district office, including this boardroom as well. But the art teachers felt like today, with some of them having some schedule conflicts and some other things, that putting together a video was great. And we are so open to any questions that you may have, but I think they wanted to express their gratitude for the wide support that we have in our district, and the board does, for the visual arts programs in our district.
Anyone have comments? I'm just kind of blown away because it's all so beautiful, and then I felt like I was right in the room with the screen being right here. Oh, there's so much talent. I hope when we get to our new space, our new district office, that we are able to incorporate art into our space.
Yep, I think over time that would be the plan.
We are planning on one of the walls that will have these systems on it. So, yep, we're definitely planning on that.
Great, thank you. All right, we do have a report coming up. Missy Eidenes and Jennifer Saar. Ukeru, I see. We even have the pronunciation here guideline for us on the handout, so thank you. Welcome. Look forward to learning.
So Jen Saar tonight will just go through our overview of Ukeru, and hopefully too we can address some of the questions that Victoria has as we go forward with that, and maybe clarify a few things. So thank you.
All right, well, thank you. I'm Jen Saar. I'm the MTSS coordinator for the district, and it's a pleasure to be back with you again tonight. So I just wanted to take some time to share the results of our pilot and how we're moving into our first year of implementation across the district with Ukeru. So yes, the very first thing that we always try to talk about is how do you say this word, right? And so the emphasis really is on care with a double O on either side of it. So it is pronounced Ukeru, and it's a Japanese word that means to receive. And at the heart of the work that has been done by Grafton Integrated Health Network, who is the parent company for Ukeru, is really about wanting to care for other people in the same way that we would want to receive care if we were being cared for, which sounds an awful lot like the Golden Rule. So what is Ukeru? And as it's been mentioned, it is a trauma-informed approach. And as you know, in the last handful of years, we've been doing a lot of work around that trauma-informed practice in our school buildings, with our students, among our staff members, keeping in mind that when we talk about trauma, very often we as human beings, we start to think about what we sometimes refer to as the big T traumas. So sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, those are often the first types of trauma that come into our head when we hear that term. But there's a great deal of research around kind of those small T traumas, things like homelessness, hunger, anxiety, depression, and the loss of somebody who might be near to us. So again, those are all traumas that affect us, and the more that we even have those small T traumas that happen subsequently, the greater the impact that it is on any of us, from children to adults. However, in a school system, we're very much focused on childhood trauma, and what we know is that kids who experience trauma, big T or little t traumas over their childhood years, they can have some for years after that, effects related to their educational outcomes and behavioral outcomes. And some of the most recent research indicates that kids who have had experienced childhood trauma are 15 times more likely to commit suicide. They are 4 times more likely as an adult to be dependent on alcohol, and they're 3 times more likely to be absent from work. So as we're thinking about having our kids be child and career ready, we also want to be sure that we are providing them with an environment that allows them to feel safe physically as well as psychologically. And this is more important to us than ever, even as we're coming upon that 1-year anniversary of COVID, because just the pandemic-related risks that we are experiencing as part of this pandemic are more likely to lead to some of the behavioral outcomes that you can see on the screen or in your handout. And so even the circumstances of the world that we're currently living in or have been living in this last year also help us to recognize that we more than ever have to be focused and be thinking about how we provide trauma-informed schools for our children. So going back to what Ukeru is, it is a trauma-informed approach. It's also a restraint-free management technique, and it's built on the idea that educational and behavioral interventions really focus on comfort versus control. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that is. But at the heart of any work that we're doing when we're talking about being trauma-informed, when we look at the pyramid on the left, you likely recognize that as Maslow's hierarchy of need. And those basic needs are at the bottom, thinking about the physiological needs, to be fed, to have water, to have shelter, as well as safety needs. And again, when we talk about those safety needs, it's not just about physically being safe, but it's also our perception, that psychological sense of safety. And that's different for all of us, depending on the experiences that we've had, any time in our lives. Then the triangle on the right, flipped upside down, is also as we think about as a brain develops. So thinking about kids in their development, it is natural for the brain to develop from the hindbrain to the midbrain, and then finally that forebrain, which is the last portion to develop. As educators, school systems, we want our kids to be able to spend a lot of time in that forebrain, at that red portion, in that abstract thought, problem solving, memory, language. But anytime something gets in the way in the hindbrain or the midbrain, kids can't access that forebrain. So that learning, that important part of learning, also gets interrupted. And what we know about is in the midbrain, that's where the amygdala lives. And if you've ever heard of fight, flight, or freeze, that's the job of the amygdala, is to help keep a person safe by either fleeing a situation, kind of fighting for survival, and then unfortunately sometimes freezing as well. So as we think about pairing our safety needs and our physiological needs, also thinking about how the brain develops, our number one job when we're working with kids and really focused on a trauma-informed practice is to keep the amygdala calm. And so what can we do? How can we respond to students? What kind of space can we give them in order to help them have that psychological safety that they're looking for? Comfort versus control. We spend a lot of time in the Ukeru training talking about the words that we choose to use with kids. So if we start to see a student who's feeling frustrated or behavior might be starting to escalate, we really talk about how can you shift what you may have otherwise said, like, okay, calm down or take a deep breath, to something like, tell me how I can help you. I'm here to keep you safe. So again, thinking about how we shift the way that we talk to students, especially as their amygdala is starting to fire, how can we respond? The other thing we talk about is sometimes it's better not to respond. Sometimes less talking is more important in that time. We also have to think about the space that we put between ourselves and a student. And so on this slide, you can see that there are essentially 4 zones that we review in the training, all the way from the intimate zone to the public zone. And you can see the distance of each of those. And essentially, as we think about the intimate zone and the personal zone, for any of us, whether you're a child or an adult, whether you've experienced multiple traumas or no traumas, typically the people who we allow into our intimate or personal zones are those people with whom we have the strongest relationships with. And so again, much of the training that trauma-informed practice is talking about, what kinds of things can we do? How can we interact with students to develop those relationships so that even if it turns into an escalated state, we can continue to develop relationship even in an escalated time. But very often it means we need to give more space to the student, because moving out of that danger of having somebody in an intimate or a personal zone does allow them to feel more comfortable and allows their amygdala to relax faster. Ukeru does teach about protective skills, and we're going to move into that portion. And protective skills for us tends to be something that we want to use as little as possible. And when we're really focused on comfort versus controlling statements, space between, how many words we use, we don't have to use those protective skills as often, and that's what we're finding. But sometimes we do, and that's when those prevention and de-escalation efforts fail. Sometimes something can happen that is unexpected. We maybe as the adults don't notice the warning signs, or a student can just be having an episode that we weren't able to prepare for. And so then we do need to move into those protective skills. And so very often what we hear about is people associate Ukeru with the use of the shields that we're going to talk about, and it's a very important part of it. However, it's not the only part of it. And so again, Ukeru is about receiving and responding to the communication that a child is displaying through their actions while we maintain safety for the student, safety for the surrounding students, and safety for the adults as well. And so Ukeru uses this soft, cushiony material, and you can see some of those examples there. Generally speaking, what we're primarily using is what's the medium body shield. So you can see there are two curved ones in the back. We don't have any of those in the district. And then those two skinnier ones are arm shields, but the other rectangular shaped one in the front is primarily what we're using in all of our buildings that have implemented Ukeru. So just a comparison, we're very pleased with the results that we're getting so far from our pilot, and then the work that we've been doing this year in the schools that have implemented Ukeru. But a couple of things to note. Sometimes when we start using Ukeru, especially early on, an incident can last longer. And we know that, and we have to just prepare for that. But what it allows us to do is to not have a student's amygdala completely fire. It allows us time to give them the opportunity to use some skills that they have been working on, some strategies that they've been developing. There is less risk of injury for the student, less risk of injury for the adults who are present. And then, as I mentioned, that relationship between the student and the adult is often preserved and many times even reinforced through that event. We piloted Ukeru in 3 of our buildings, Horace Mann, Kennedy, and Lewis and Clark last year. We had the deans from each of those 3 buildings trained, as well as a couple of additional folks that were also trained as trainers. And so we implemented initially in December of last year. And then due to COVID, we wrapped up for the year in March of 2020. So we just had a few months of data that we were able to look at. When we looked at December through March of 2019-20 and compared it to that same time period in the 2018-2019 school year, we had over 75% reduction in restraints from those two years. And the other piece that we did is we spent some time talking with the staff members who were trained and who had been there the previous year as well, and just to get an understanding for how were they feeling about it. And the information that they were providing included things like, everything is calmer. I feel like I know what I'm supposed to do. I don't feel so anxious as the adult. I feel like my amygdala is also staying calmer so I can think through what I'm supposed to be doing. With that reduction in restraint and just the feedback that we were receiving, we knew we needed to keep moving forward. And so in August, in the August 2020 column, you can see we trained the deans at each of the schoolings without the asterisk. Those were the locations where we were going to be having deans. And so we trained them all as trainers so that they could be at their buildings, they could serve as coaches, they could also provide any training if they had staff turnover, help to problem solve if there was a particular situation that was problematic. They would have somebody who was trained as a trainer to help navigate that process. We also provided training for Madison and Washington, and they're just asterisked because they don't have a trainer in their buildings. So they become a little bit more dependent on a trainer from another building or within the district to help support them and do some of that coaching. And then in response this year to just various needs that kind of bubbled up, we also have a team of users trained at Davies, North, McKinley, and then there's been a lot of staff turnover this year. So trying to keep up on the paraprofessionals specifically that may have been originally trained as part of their building team that left for whatever the reason might be and somebody was hired, trying to keep up on that training as well. And I neglected to mention, we did train those deans at each of those buildings, but then each of those buildings also has a team. So there are trainers, and then there are users, is typically how we refer to them, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So we did want to take a look at the data. As I mentioned, Grafton Integrated Health Systems, their focus really is on reducing staff injury and reducing restraints. And so those are the two main items that we have continued to look at as well. Also recognizing this thing called COVID makes it really difficult to look at some of the trends. You know, we just have to recognize it is what it is and continue to collect and analyze as we move forward. But for the last 4 years, as we look at elementary only, you can see the number of restraints. And then obviously the 2020-2021 school year is just through the end of February, that data. So from 2018-19, prior to doing anything, we had a reduction of restraints by 9%. As we moved into last year, again, recognizing that in-person schooling concluded for us in mid-March, but we had a 65% reduction, and that was just with our 3 highest restraint number buildings. I don't know if I said that right, but I think you know what I'm getting at, who had implemented Ukeru in December. So they had a 68.1 reduction from the baseline year of 2017-18. And then again for 2020-21, as we look at just through February and doing those comparisons, a reduction of more than 70% from the previous school year, and then a reduction of over 85% from the baseline year of 2017-2018. So we'll continue to collect that information as we move throughout the remainder of the school year, but that's kind of a snapshot of where we are today in 2020-2021. And then that other important piece of information that Ukeru really focuses on in terms of reduction is staff injury. And they use the term by client because they don't only provide training to educational systems, but they also do medical facilities. So last year we had 315 injuries, staff injuries that were caused by a student. And then in 2020-2021, at this point, we've had a reduction of over 61% of staff injuries that were a result of a student. And then I just took that information and broke it down by month so you could see by month what that looks like, knowing that at the elementary, starting in January, so we've had our kids back obviously for 5 days a week, but recognizing as well that December and November, they were back for 4 days a week, so you can kind of just see that. Again, lots of things to take into consideration as you're looking at this data as a result of COVID. So then as we just talk about maintaining and expanding, I think just what we're seeing in terms of the data, but then also what we're seeing in terms of that qualitative piece as we visit and interview folks in the buildings, there is a definite desire and need to continue the work that we've started. But it doesn't come without a cost, right? Like anything, it doesn't come without a cost. We do have to train annually. So we currently have 12 trainers in the district, and each of those trainers, it costs about $330 plus travel for each trainer that we recertify yearly. And then as I mentioned, the other piece is the users. Once we have users certified, they just need to recertify. So it goes from a full day training if they're new to a half day recertification for each subsequent year. And then those shields that I had mentioned are about a $140 cost per shield. And we have some with puncture holes and some, artwork. We could have perhaps brought some of those as well. They've been used to be drawn upon, but even still, they maintain their integrity and continue to be used. But we are also talking about what are our next steps in terms of expanding the program. We are looking at continuing to to train new trainers so that we do have somebody who's considered a trainer at each of our locations. And again, for the coaching, for the problem solving, to support any new staff that might be joining a team mid-year is just critical. And then as well, each year, just reevaluating the need. We are looking at small teams of buildings, so it's not an entire building that we're training on the full day training, I guess I keep saying it, but it really is about a small group of people that respond to an escalated situation, and that's who should be receiving the full day. The half-day training option is available to everyone, and that's where the heart of the trauma-informed practices really is, and why it's so critical, and really why it's working so well, because we have built upon the previous years of trauma-informed practices that have been previously established. So it's not, it's not a cheap expense by any means. And I think it's really important to know that it is about building trust, and we know that trust comes from healthy relationships between students and adults, because like Dr. Bruce Perry says, it's people, not programs, but the people who change people. And that's really what we're seeing. We're seeing changes occur, and excited about what's yet to come.
I think what I'd just like to add is that when we visit with our deans who are trained as trainers, they felt like the training really did partner with our trauma-informed training that we've been having, and it also has changed the way they're onboarding new staff, new paraprofessionals, and this is how we're going to do it at our building. And we are going to do it in a very caring way, and we are going to make sure you feel confident. So empowered to be one of the words that we're seeing in staff. And again, when a staff member can stay calm and talk to a student and tell you, I care for you, we're going to get through this, even if it takes longer, we find that there's such a benefit as we go forward. So it also makes us reflect on our, let's see if I say it right, CPI training. And CPI is training how to do a physical restraint. And because we saw such a nice de-escalation in physical restraints, we have wonderings that this might be a stronger model for what we believe in for caring for kids at our buildings. We might still need to make sure people know how to do that correctly if it would be needed to protect a child from themselves as we go forward, but we just want to make sure that we do provide that opportunity to keep going down this path, because we do think it is a much more positive interactions and relationships as we're working with children.
I think Jen and Missy have done a wonderful job with not only the implementation of the program, but even demonstrating the success of our Ukeru program in our district and the data today. At yesterday's board work session, we had extensive conversations around district finances and priorities. That's probably one of the biggest challenges for board members year after year, is identifying what are priorities that are immediate at that time and then be able to allocate resources accordingly. This is a prime example of your support. In isolation, we know that not only did the program have an expense, but last year and even the year before, when administration had brought a model to provide additional support at our elementary schools with the dean program, that was questioned, and rightfully so, but we would not have been able to utilize a train-the-train program unless we were able to put in the people to support our staff and create Ukeru teams at each of our buildings had the board not approved that. So just know that 2.5 years ago, without a doubt, the biggest challenges facing our district were employee safety, and they were student restraints from the student side or for the staff side. And I think all of the board was familiar to that conversation. It was something our district was known for. In 2 years, we've reduced both numbers by over 65%. And we've been able to do that because of the support that the board gave in hiring those elementary deans and implementing the Ukeru program as well. So just want to express my gratitude for that and kind of reflect on systemically how far we've come. Not that we don't have, there's plenty of room for us to grow as well, but a 65% decrease in both staff injuries and then also restraints over time is just pretty significant in a 2-year period.
Thank you, Robin.
So I'm very familiar with CPI. We have a CPI certified trainer in my staff, and there is a de-escalation component in the CPI. How does the de-escalation component in CPI compare to Ukeru other than the results? Is there something very broadly different?
You know, I don't know that it's very broadly different. I think it expands the toolkit. So and we're not saying to not use the CPI de-escalation. That's still, if you've been trained and those are strategies that you're comfortable with, we encourage educators to continue using them. It allows us to think more systemically about the environment, about the interaction. You know, even ourselves as the adult who's responding, like, where am I at right now? Am I the right person to be responding? Am I in a position that is going to support the situation and not maybe hinder it further? So again, just trying to think more holistically about the totality of the current situation, and CPI de-escalation strategies are also still encouraged to be used.
Dr. Gandhi?
And Jen, and I see Mr. Cody walked in as well, and I heard you say that we have started to expand our program at Davies as well. Are we seeing similar successes with even an older group of students that might physically be larger than that we were at the elementary level, even if it's anecdotal data at this point?
We are, yeah, and I wouldn't be able to provide specific information to the building, but it's important to remember that these strategies, again, were developed working with adults. So they were first developed for adult use and then curtailed and modified in order to work with people who are smaller. So the initial development of it was for larger, taller kids and people.
Jennifer?
Thank you, Jennifer. So my question is related to how does this compare, or is it combined with Envoy training? Is the district still doing that as well? And
it's a nice marriage between them, actually, because one of the gems of Envoy really is that nonverbal piece. And so we know that when kids are, well, not even just kids, right? Even as adults, when we're feeling frustrated, the last thing we want is somebody putting a lot of words on us. And so it's a beautiful marriage in that regard, that you can provide a lot of direction and information if you're using those nonverbal strategies that Envoy really implores.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robin?
To that point, I think it would be very helpful for the board to see how these programs integrate. If we are going to prioritize budget dollars, I got a lot of programs. So where do we filter those dollars and how do they work together? I think that would be very helpful from a budgeting perspective, for myself anyway.
And I just want to clarify that we are not across the board doing Envoy. Buildings were allowed to select, but that is the wondering that we're bringing back to the principals. What is the consistent model for our classroom management that we want to have? And we are right now having conversations around that Envoy training. We also believe that Envoy has some pieces that really support equity in classrooms. And so that is a really nice marriage on top of the trauma-informed method as we're going forward with planning.
Any other questions, comments? Hopefully we're on the right path, right, or for improvement. Always room to improve and learn and do things better. So thank you for the information and some. Clearly, like you said, if we weren't in the face of COVID, well, we'd have different data to look at, but thank you for the information that we do have and all the work that you're doing, and it's a wonderfully informed presentation.
And Rebecca, I'll just say that even the data that was presented today was a comparison from February to February, so it was prior to COVID.
Makes sense. So we have a full year to look at it. Yep. All right. The next report is the COVID-19 instructional plan update. Dr. Gandhi and Dr. Newman.
I'll hand it over to Dr. Newman.
Sure, thank you. I gave you guys a board report here. I'm happy to report we started at 7 a.m. instead of 6:30 a.m. and it was short and sweet, so things are going well. We started as usual with our epidemiologist Brenton reporting out our Cass County data. Positivity rate, hospitalization rate, and mortality rate are all down for Cass County. Our new positives per day, when looking at a 14-day rolling average, is 16.79 cases per day. Our 14-day positivity rate is below 2% for the first time in a very long time at 1.99%, which is really encouraging. Our hospitalizations are down. We're currently at 23 statewide, and it's thought that the monoclonal antibody therapy is helping improve that rate. And again, the majority of those hospitalized remain people with underlying conditions. COVID-19 deaths statewide, we're at 21 for the month of February. And I think I reported this last time too, but our lowest active cases remain in that 80-plus age range. And it's thought that that's a possible effect of being able to vaccinate that group so early. Currently, we have vaccinated 20.1% of North Dakota residents and 18.8% of Cass County with at least one dose. And Brenton reported he thinks that number is even higher due to people being vaccinated at the VA, and that's not being recorded in these numbers, and people who are snowbirding and being vaccinated elsewhere. So probably even higher than those percentages. And currently statewide, we are in priority group 1B at the very last tier, and some people are even at 1C. And then we had provided the FPS staff data. I probably won't run through all this. It's there visually for you guys, but 3 staff members tested positive this week and 5 were out due to a positive test. The breakdown is there. The substitute fill rate, again, it's nice to compared to a year ago at 2020 versus now. If you look at total teachers, this time last year we were at 19.75% and we are currently at 11.79%. Paraeducators continue to be a struggle. Last year was 66.55% and we're currently at 71.23%, and the totals are there. But I think overall we're improved in this area. And then looking at student data as of 9 p.m. on Sunday night, there was 7 students in isolation due to a positive test. The breakdown by age is there, all less than 1%. Student close contacts, was down. We had a total of 115, and again, these are due to family close contacts, community related, not necessarily in the school building. And then student close contacts quarantined, we had 43 out that were due to not wearing a mask. And then the discussion at our meeting was essentially a lot around vaccination plans and what's that looking like in our community, and then the current Fargo Public Schools plan for vaccinating staff in conjunction with Fargo Cass Public Health and West Fargo Public Schools, which you've all received a lot of information about. And then we talked about future discussion of possibly looking at moving to level 5 with masks, I'll call it a modified level 5. And we set our next meeting date for April 13th, which will allow us to monitor data from spring break. And that also will be when all the teachers have received both vaccines. So we're happy to take any questions.
One thing that I would just add is I know that as our community and our school districts begins the vaccination process, there's just been a lot of conversations because of, including my own excitement to return to some sort of normalcy and questions around masking as well. And it almost feels like we've gone full circle from the start of the school year, because I think we need to remind all of our stakeholders as well that one of the biggest implications around masking is around the mask close contacts versus non. So just looking at the data that was presented to you, even if we had a majority of our students vaccinated, or which is, at this point we're not vaccinating children and our staff, and with the current restrictions and guidance that we have, we would have had 115 students out this past week instead of 43. So masking, until we receive any other guidance from Fargo Cass Public Health, or there are significant changes in what the school directions have been given from both the state and local healthcare official levels, they're here to stay, at least for the time being, until we're told otherwise.
Questions, Robin?
There were some questions about legislation for masking, for blocking masking requirements. It was kind of an aha moment during our crossover meeting when we talked about the fact that we can keep our kids in school is due to masks. And so Superintendent Basler has logged a number of education hours that have been saved from the double masking allowance through the governor. So we will compile those and work. That bill snuck by. Nobody thought it would pass.
I don't expect it to pass in the Senate, but we will have to be in front of it to keep our kids in school, because that is the goal, is in-person learning.
Any questions or comments regarding that report? All right, thank you. The next item is a report from the FEA. I don't see anyone in the audience here from the FEA, so we'll move on to the superintendent report.
Rebecca, the legislative update.
Oh, I am so sorry. Robin, please continue.
This is the most I've been prepared, so just kidding.
Then I forgot, sorry.
That's okay, I've done it too, I've been in your chair. From the federal level, I'm sure you all know that the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package is going through the legislative process. There's included in that is $120 billion for direct aid for K-12 education, with special earmarks for dollars to be directed to students with disabilities. And also there's a mandate for transparent school reopening plans. There is also federally some movement on a bipartisan investigation into the impact of school closures on children with disabilities. So everybody is certainly wanting to get back to school, and I think that was something that was talked about yesterday nicely in our work session. I did provide each of you with a calendar, a monthly planning calendar, if it was passed around for our Governmental Affairs Committee. This is possibly a piece that can help us look at GP7 if we want to make some changes. This follows what we've been doing for years. In December, I think what might be of interest is the first arrow, seek board direction about advocacy and decisions between meetings, and that became a discussion point. Hope you find this helpful. Jolynn makes the agendas based upon this, and it seems to be serving our district very well. So let me know if you have any questions on that. There was some discussion too as to how best to relay the board's holistic opinion on certain bills. So I got a little game for you. How many bills do you think we track at North Dakota School Boards Association this session? Don't answer that, Jim. Close? 171. This year, there were 100 bills fewer in the state legislature. In Fargo Public, we have 102 on our bill tracking sheet. We have, I'm sure they're included into that 171, but these are more local. You know, the North Dakota School Boards Association gets into some really nitty-gritty for rural school districts that, quite frankly, I cannot humanly manage on top of my full-time job running a multi-million-dollar nonprofit. So we are keeping an eye on 102 bills. 36 of them have been defeated or withdrawn since crossover. So we do have a bill tracking list that Jolynn, it's a very tedious process to put together. It's her favorite thing to do every year. But that is always available to anybody anybody for that matter. We've on the board here. So that's one of the pieces that we look at. Really the main piece though, and something that hit home that Rebecca mentioned, when we hear from people saying, why aren't you pushing this bill? Why aren't you doing that? It's really hard to focus on a bill if it's not going to be heard the next week. It's really the only manageable way to track those bills and advocate, except for a few key bills. So we pick out our key bills there. Our legislators don't want to hear what's going to happen 3 weeks from now. They're going to forget. So this is a very efficient way for, I feel, to manage, but I'm always open for advice for sure. Some clusters of bills that have been defeated out of the 171, number of bills would have reduced or limited taxable valuations or created significant property tax exemptions. There was a bill that would have allowed candidates in local elections to declare a party affiliation. Thank goodness, we opposed that. A bill that would have prohibited schools from requiring vaccines, and a bill that would have required districts to run a background check on every district employee or contractor, even if they did not have a contract with students. We had a bill that was removed that a bill that would have removed all taxing authorities of local school districts. So that's talking local here. A bill requiring a district to adopt a restraint and seclusion policy. A bill that would have provided the state auditor with unfettered access to school records. So those are some of the clusters of bills that have been taken off the table, but some of the main ones that we are looking forward to that we'll watch closely, the big one is the funding bill, House Bill 1388, and that continues to evolve, and that typically those big funding bills are approved at the very end of the session because they figure out whatever else they have left, we get to fight over in public education. There is 2278, a bill providing for immunity for schools for COVID-related liability. There's some controversy on that because there are already some pieces in our legal system that do not allow for frivolous lawsuits. So the lawyers that I've talked to think this is an unnecessary bill, but it's politically charged right now. Bill to put transportation aid payments into the funding formula. We're watching that one very closely. And that's a positive in our mind. 1356 to mandate certain recruiting groups exclusive access into schools. I did testify against that. It would allow Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts access to our students during the school day. However, nobody else. That will be federally challenged. And of course, we all know about 2215, the bill NDSBA worked on that would add a deadline of July 1st to the negotiation timeline. So those last few we mentioned probably get a little bit more of my attention, and the other ones we can try to continue to manage as they evolve. I did share with you how quickly a bill changed that was published in the Fargo Forum, and that's an example. Actually, that changed a week and a half ago, if not two. But things change quickly, and unless you're watching them almost throughout the day, it's really hard to stay on top of them. But I'm committed to do that because that is my obligation to you, being in this position. But always open to questions and suggestions.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, thank you, Robin. Dr. Gandhi, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing in addition to that. I mean, administration is also, we work closely with Robin, but there might be some different positions or different testimonies that we provide as well. We are working with a couple of different partnering agencies as well. We've partnered kind of with Sanford Health. They've been providing testimony on a bill coming up this week. It's called the Learn Everywhere Bill. It provides students, if a district approves an appropriate policy and gets approved by DPI, the opportunity for students to receive credit for curriculum experiences that might be outside of a physical school building. Sanford's very interested in that bill because it can assist with a workforce piece for them through a CNA program. That would be a meaningful opportunity, so it would have to get vetted through our policy that we would create. So we are in support of that bill. That's something that we're working on. Our Director of Equity and Inclusion, Tamara Uselman, is going to provide written testimony on the transgendered bill that would limit transgendered athletes from participation. That goes against our mission in Fargo Public Schools and what we want to accomplish. So she'll be providing testimony on that as well. And then one of our partnering agencies, which is PATH, is doing a joint testimony pretty much with Missy as well. It's based on the budget that is approved for DHS. So we can provide targeted case management for some of our high-risk students that we've been doing with PATH, and we've been able to use some of those dollars to do that. So those are probably the only things that weren't mentioned already.
Right on.
Thank you, Robin.
And I would add to that, 1429 is the transgender bill. Tamara is going to be, I don't know if it's testimony or she's emailing, but.
She has emailed, but she might be providing the written testimony, but not giving it orally too.
Got it. So I've been contacted from several other partner agencies that are interested in partnering with us to defeat that bill. The economic impact, medical doctors, and health professionals. So that's how I decide when we step back. And I will tell you, there are times when it is not appreciated when Fargo is at the podium all the time. And there are bills that are not passed because we have too many Fargo legislators on them. So this is just the way it is, and it depends on which party is on the bill and what sponsors are there. And so we have to use our time effectively and wisely, and also advocate for smaller school districts but not get in the way of some of the other forces that might have a stronger voice than we do because we're often there.
Jennifer.
Thank you. So, thank you for the handout and a little bit of maybe a recap of what was discussed at the end of the meeting yesterday. And I'm really sorry that I couldn't stay for that last half hour. But on that note, I just jotted down a few things because past practice, one of the things that you had mentioned was a listing of bills that we're tracking and that have been withdrawn or defeated. And I do remember earlier on in my tenure on the board, getting that at board meetings. I know that you had mentioned we could request it, but perhaps it could be one way to inform the board on a more regular basis, specific bills. I mean, I know sometimes as chairs or liaisons we share out, but it's hard to always remember every single detail of every committee meeting. So perhaps that would be helpful. And I also know that you send emails and that's appreciated, but then it's, collectively here together, and you send on the ones that are kind of, like you said, coming up this week, right? Where the list is kind of a list of 102 bills. And then I guess I would say previously also, prior to maybe the last year and a half, committee members or non-committee members were, in my opinion, encouraged and were allowed to participate. And I feel like even at this point in time, that's even more important than ever. And since there was a change to policy recently, we're not. And I think that maybe that is an opportunity to be revisited, because if you really want the full board to be involved in a decision, or you're going to say that it's representative of the full board, really our voices should be allowed to participate in the conversation. And that's a real limiting factor. So unless you're going to say the committee feels this way, that's one thing. But if you're going to send something that represents the full board, I think that that's really, we're kind of, that's not entirely true all the time, and at least being allowed to speak at a committee as a non-committee member on a bill would give that everyone an opportunity to weigh in. So there's that. And then in terms of just timeline, like you said, there are bills that are watched from the very beginning. And I do like the suggestion here, or the addition, I think it's an addition, of really sort of telling or involving the board in the conversation of who plans to testify and what that looks like, versus hearing about it maybe later or whatever, just to have a more formalized opportunity to have that conversation. So just some thoughts.
Robin, and then I'll mention a couple things from yesterday's conversation. Go ahead.
Absolutely. A lot of the times the testimonies I'm not aware of. I don't coordinate those, other than if somebody from our district that I'm aware of is going to testify, I'll let you know. Exactly to your point, so I printed off the hard copies of the legislative tracker that we use. I could easily make copies for every meeting and send it to, or give it to the board. But you also have a link to access that. So if you want a hard copy at every board meeting, I'd be happy to provide that. And this is an example of that. So thank you for bringing that up, spot on. As far as what I was explaining yesterday is I take everybody's feedback, not only during legislative session, but during non-legislative sessions, because I probably work not as often on governmental affairs, but I work throughout the year to build those relationships with our legislators from both parties. This is not just a legislative season piece. Work on bills, make trips to Bismarck, visit with our legislators individually. So this is just kind of the culminate, kind of like come to a board meeting. We do so much more work behind the scenes. So I want everybody to be aware of that, and I lost my train of thought. But taking everything that I'm hearing here, now I remember, I take that forward. And so what I did is I removed from the heading on our opinion or our position statements, even though the board has empowered me to do that, in my estimation, and it says Fargo Public Schools Governmental Affairs Committee. That's out of respect for you, I may have overstepped, because that is how I'm trying to interpret it. I still feel like I'm empowered by the board, but that's really why I wanted that discussion yesterday. So always want your feedback and suggestions.
Jennifer?
If I may, I should have added that too, because I did notice that, and I appreciate that, and I think that that is a more appropriate and fair way to say, this is representation of the committee. So I did notice that.
So there were some folks that had to leave early, and this discussion was the last item on our work session yesterday. By the way, thanks for everyone all of us were at the work session and provided lots of great dialogue on many agenda items, so thanks. So a few of the things that I think Anne Marie will have reflected in the minutes in terms of some takeaways that I'm thinking we can look at. This is more for next year now for preparation, so that maybe we won't have this same kind of discussion. We have other discussions regarding GAC, but something else. And we could refer maybe to this planner that you have, Robin, for our timing on this, but to place on our agenda planner for the governance committee, the approval of the legislative priorities booklet, which is the booklet that is developed, really kind of a combination between GAC and then also taking into consideration thoughts from administration. But that's the booklet that really, at least as far as what I see, and I think Robin too, is what guides those bills that we end up really following. So potentially looking at an official approval by the board of that legislative priorities document, and then also possibly, maybe it would be along at that same time, I'm not sure, but the opportunity to entertain a motion for approval that would give GAC or give the GAC chair authority to, act kind of like what is going on right now, but where we would officially approve that. And so just looking at maybe those two steps helping us, because then we'd have some discussion, around that. We also talked about the opportunity for, like Robin said, if anyone has a question, any board member has a question, feel free to just pick up the phone and give her a call. I've done that a few times, and just said, hey, you're GAC chair, but these are a couple of questions that I have. These are a couple things I'm wondering about. These are some things I've heard on this bill or that bill. Kind of plant the seed and take it where you feel like it needs to go based on, again, our legislative priorities. And ultimately, she has more information than I do on this. I see her really as the expert in terms of those of us as board members here. I know, Jim, you have much expertise too, but in terms of head of GAC, I'm really the expert that can help guide us. So that, I think, kind of wraps up our conversation from yesterday. And maybe even just some more discussions like we had today, and the updates that have been provided will be helpful. But I have trust in the work that you're doing, and faith in the work that you're doing, and know that it's not done in isolation. It's not only even GAC. It's work with administration here. It's work with West Fargo, and so we are working in a holistic way to do this necessary work that needs to be done in such a timely manner. Anyone else have any comments or questions? All right, thank you. And yes.
So I saw you taking notes as to what we were saying, so I just wanted actually to take this opportunity to ask really about one of the things that I had suggested was when non-committee members are not allowed to speak at a committee or participate. Is that something, I would like to hear from others, and I don't think the new board members were on the board when that change occurred. And so, I kind of find it problematic in many ways, and I don't know that anyone is disruptive, and so I just feel like maybe we should revisit it, because especially in circumstances like this, even if it's in limited times, that we really consider that. Because if that's where, like Robin's saying, the heavy lifting gets done, if you want more board participation, which, we're all here to do that work, then why aren't we allowing that to happen? I mean, it can't be, the quorum can't be the reason because there's already 5 on a committee. So that's a different conversation.
Are you requesting to have that be put on a governance committee agenda?
Please.
Okay, I'll take that note, thank you. Anything else? Great. And now, we will skip over E. No, we don't have anyone from the FEA here. On to the superintendent's report. Dr. Gandhi.
Sure. 2 quick things for my report today. First off, as board members know, we as a district were notified, greatly surprised that Fargo Cass Public Health is able to organize a vaccine blitz this week and then do round 2 of the Pfizer vaccine at the end of March, beginning of April. And for those reasons, to accommodate our staff, we transitioned to distance learning. And we understand that that has been a challenge and that's difficult for many parents to be able to do that. We were notified maybe of a Wednesday afternoon with a potential communication going out the following day that there are 3 days between Fargo and West Fargo Public Schools to do a vaccine blitz. The hours and the location determined by Fargo Cass Public Health. We, as Fargo Public Schools, we had, at that time, I think close to 1,400 staff members that had signed up to take the vaccine. So the only way that we are able to provide coverage, or actually make sure that we don't have a loss for coverage and get over 1,000 staff members vaccinated during that time, was be able to transition to distance learning. West Fargo Public Schools actually worked with us, and this is their idea, which was great, for each school district to split up the day and a half. So we only have to go to distance learning for 2 days versus 3 days. So we are trying to maximize in-person instruction as much as we can. Again, I know it's difficult, but logistically, we're working with our partners. We're excited about the opportunity that we can vaccinate all of our staff. West Fargo Public Schools is able to transition to distance learning just for secondary, not for their elementary. They haven't announced what they're going to do for round 2 of that shot yet, but that information is forthcoming as well. We announced all 4 days ahead of time. One of the factors for them in terms of being able to, why they're able to do that versus us, is that they did tell us that they had a significant amount of people come off their list and less people that needed to be vaccinated, because as we know that there's been other opportunities being opened up around town as well. I think as of today, we, at least through our system, we have 42% of our staff have either been vaccinated or are signed up to get vaccinated. So we still have a ways to go yet. We had, I believe when we first did the initial survey, we had about 65% of our staff signed up, but we had more people that were interested, and we had provided some education around vaccine as well. So we as a district do have a lot of staff that have been vaccinated, but also a lot of staff that need to go through that. So grateful for our parents and our community for understanding the flexibility for that distance learning, but that was the only way that we thought that we can make it work, given our numbers. Second announcement today is just the best thing I get to ever do as a superintendent, which was today, and it's the best day of the job because I get to announce a Teacher of the Year. This year we did get to, today we got to recognize Mrs. Jessica Magnuson from Carl Ben Allison Middle School. She is called a literacy partner because she teaches, but she's also a literacy coach for other teachers in the building. Just an absolute educator. Jim, she is also an alumni of South High School, which probably speaks to her great successes as well. But just something that we truly recognize, and just if you get a chance, please extend your congratulations, because a very well-deserved award as Teacher of the Year.
Robin.
I want to speak a little bit about signing up for the vaccine, because I'm in one of those classes, and 1B is childcare providers right prior to teachers. You're very limited as to when you can sign up. For your section, they give you about 10 days to sign up, and they give you a list to plug in. So I think a lot of the public doesn't understand that. We are not control of providing the vaccines. Fargo Cass Public Health is. It is not like you can take those vaccines and take them to the schools and line people up either. At least that's what I've been told, but that's what we're hearing. So it's pretty tricky to keep school operating, and I know that from a child care provider perspective, with only 100 employees, and you've got 1,900. So I give you grace, and I extend you grace, I think is what I'm trying to say, and I hope that others do as well, because it's so important to get our teachers that want to be, and every employee, to get vaccinated, because that's what's going to keep us in school for the long term.
David?
What I had to say went along with what Robin said. I think a lot of the frustration by the public was the fact that the 2 days when the vaccinations are occurring are followed by a full week of spring break. Have we taken every opportunity to explain that these were the day, we didn't choose the days, these were the days the vaccine was available?
We did send an email to all parents the following day, letting them know that the days were assigned by Fargo Pass Public Health.
Any other questions? And I too ask for the community's support in this, well, hopefully it's a minor inconvenience overall, so that we can have our staff be safe in terms of the opportunities to have healthy lives. And that is going to impact the ability for our students to be safer, and really ultimately our whole community. It's a community effort. And as one of the largest employers in the city of Fargo, for the Fargo School District, it's essential that the staff members have the opportunity, and wonderful gift that the staff members have the opportunity to receive this vaccine. So hopefully it's taken full advantage of, and it's something to celebrate, realizing that there is an inconvenience, but ultimately it's something to celebrate, and we're celebrating the opportunity to be healthier as a community. Is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda? Is there a second?
Second with the approval, with the addition of the HR addendum.
Okay, there's a motion and a second with the approval of the HR addendum for the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Would we like a break? It's 7:05. We take a quick break, no more than 10 minutes, hopefully a little shorter. Thank you. Okay, we're back in session. It is 7:12 PM. We're on to the business section of the agenda. The first item is the superintendent evaluation memo 102. Jim?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the superintendent evaluation dated March 9th of 2021 and accept and file it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Jim and second by Seth for approval of the superintendent's evaluation. Is there any discussion, any questions? Rupak?
Just want to express my gratitude to the board. I love Fargo Public Schools. I love serving as your superintendent. I think continuous improvement is part of the process, so I also appreciate the feedback. And thank you very much. And always know that we're here for kids and we want to grow. So feedback that you have, don't ever feel like you have to leave it to the twice-a-year evaluation as well. I'm always a phone call away and open to any suggestions, as long as for the kids for Fargo Public Schools.
Thank you for the excellent work that you're doing for us. Looking forward to the continued service. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Anne Marie, would you please call the roll?
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Second item, award of bids for the district office renovations, memo 101. This comes to us from Dr. Gandhi and Jackie Gapp. Dr. Gandhi?
I will introduce it and ask Mrs. Gapp to take over. As board members know, after going through planning and then subsequently board approved some renovation, specifically in the garden level at the new district office, formerly known as RDO, formerly known as Western States Building. Upon scoping the work and when we went for bids, the bids came out larger. There were two items that just were not, that had to be addressed. The building does have some things that they were grandfathered in before, or it's just an older building, specifically around accessibility as well. So Jackie can speak through some of the bids that came back, and the numbers are a little small for my eyes as well, but they are presented for you, so I will hand it over to Jackie.
Yeah, they are kind of small, I see now. Yeah, we, as you proceed through this process in a building that was constructed in different phases, you don't really know what you get into sometimes with renovations until you start opening things up and really taking a look. So there were a couple of things that came up that we had to address that were not part of the initial scope of the project. One being handicap accessible bathrooms. There currently are none in that building. So the bids before you do include making the garden level bathroom accessible. So I just want everyone to know that that will be the only accessible bathroom, which is up to code, but we will not have that then as we sit on the first or second levels. The other item that came up is to bring it up to code for fire sprinkling. And that was a significant item. We had to, or have to install a larger metered valve, and that's about as technical as I will get on my own with that information, in order to be up to code for sprinkling the building as well. And then there were some other issues we found downstairs, I think, as we're working with the airflow and some of the other items that needed to be replaced. So the other part of this is, as you can see from the bid tab, we did not have a lot of vendors bidding on this. Some of that is due, I'm sure, to timing. The rest of it probably due to them looking and seeing that this is not a large project for them. In discussing with the architect, the other piece of this is that they have seen since the beginning of the year quite an increase in bids coming in with material costs as well that are rising. So with that, I guess if you have any other questions, that is where we're at as of now.
Dr. Gandhi?
And I do want to provide some clarity on the final recommendation coming from administration as well. When the original project was presented to planning, there were 2 alternatives that planning had said to move forward, and the board moved forward with those alternatives as well. As we went out for bid, it became 4 alternatives, but the alternatives that we're asking to approve this project with, alternative 1, covers what was discussed at planning, plus a little bit more. And what that little bit more is, at planning, the 2 alternatives were redoing the threads on the stairwell going down to the garden level, and then the restrooms in the garden level. This covers that, plus just redoing the threads for the rest of the stairwell going up the 1st and 2nd floor, because it's the same quality or condition as of now.
Right, it's not only the treads on the stairs, but just the entire stairwell, then from the garden level up to the 2nd floor, is what is included as of now in the bids you see.
Jim?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the lowest responsible base plus alternate 1 bids of $764,695 for district office renovation and district administration to award the contracts.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second. Any discussion, any questions? Jennifer?
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for clarifying, because I was sitting there racking my brain, when did we talk about this at planning? So thank you. But as I remember, can you help me understand, did we accelerate a timeline? Because in my mind, when the RDO building was brought to us as an option, we were, correct me if I'm mistaken, told that we could move in with about $80,000, it would be move-in ready. And so how did we get from 80,000 to 764?
Great question. That was the conversation we brought to the planning meeting. This was the planning meeting that was at the RDO location.
Oh.
That was the project that we had brought to the board, and we were very transparent that we could move in to the RDO building, and the boardroom would sit as is. The question for the board to debate was, prior to moving in, do we want to do the work to make the boardroom into a long-term boardroom that we could use? Currently, the garden level is a space that we can go in, we can put in tables like this and meet, and that was a conversation. We had that meeting at that planning committee, and then the recommendation came to the full board for that additional scope of work, and that's where we're at.
Any other questions? David?
Were we not aware when we made our initial offering that the bathrooms were not compliant and the sprinkler system was not compliant?
Correct. I was not aware at that time.
Correct. I would agree. Unfortunately, I don't know that any of us walked into the bathrooms, right, to verify or check that they were accessible. This building had been grandfathered into a lot of things that we no longer would qualify for with that respect. And the fire line, we just found out of that in beginning of February, I believe, and that was an unknown item as well.
Jennifer?
So that's actually an excellent question, because that should have had to have been disclosed. And that would have been on the responsibility of the previous owner to disclose it, as well as the agent to make sure they were aware and informed us of.
Rupak? Dr. Gandhi?
I can't speak to it. I mean, I don't know. I didn't know until we went down to the garden level. I mean, yeah.
I would say then, it would be, in my opinion, I think that we should hold off on approving this until you can have that conversation with at least the commercial agency to find out what legal parameters there might be on this sort of item, if there's any responsibility on the seller to fix it. Because it is a code question that should have been disclosed, I would think.
Jim?
Yeah, if in fact it was a known to them, it should have been disclosed. It might not have been a known. But regardless of that, I don't think we hold off moving forward. All we're doing there is delaying when we can start using our new property. So I think it's well worth looking into, probably with one of our attorneys, whether or not we have any kind of legal action to go back for some of those dollars to RDO. But again, they may not have been aware of it. And if they're not aware of it, they can't disclose it.
David?
Well, we're really at a position, or at a point where we have we have to approve this. We have to do these improvements. I'm sure it's federal regulations and state regulations. This is a public building. We have to have handicap accessibility and the sprinkler system. Can this be taken from building fund money?
Jackie?
Yes, that is where this will be paid from. Correct.
Seth, and then Dr. Gandhi.
I would also, to elaborate a little bit on Jim's point, there's no reason why we can't investigate whether or not this could be paid for by the seller. But if you look a little further on business number D, us delaying us getting into our new property delays us from possibly getting income from this property as well.
Dr. Gandhi?
And I think to Jim's place, I wouldn't assume ill intent. I don't think they would know because they were grandfathered in. I think that's the difference. The RDO building's been a building for a long time. It is a beautiful building. For a building that size, the work that we are doing is work that we are doing to make it into a school board meeting in the garden level. A lot of that space has been usable, and we're going to be able to transfer directly on that second and first floor. And I think we kind of touched space on that on the planning side. In terms of my interactions with RDO, I don't think there's any question that they wouldn't have known, just because they've probably been grandfathered in there for so long.
Jennifer?
Okay, so in terms of pushing it back, that's a great point, Seth, in terms of our potential tenant here for this building. However, if I heard correctly, the renovations to the bathroom and some of these things to code are not in necessarily the areas where the district would immediately, need the space where the initial plan was, because that garden level, if I recall, wasn't in the initial plan for the renovations. So even if it was decided to wait on this, I don't know that, do we know for sure that it would delay the move over there?
I would think that, Jackie and Dr. Gandhi, you can add, but seems like we would not be able to, with the work that's being done in that building now, be able to open up a public building that's not handicapped accessible and that does not have the necessary, sprinkler system. So basically, we'd be opening up we wouldn't even be able to open that building up. An inspection wouldn't pass.
And in addition to that, the primary scope of the work is on the garden level, but everything is, nothing's kind of done in isolation. So in the garden level, there are 3 glass spaces where we're going to potentially put the dais in the boardroom. Should this get approved tonight, those office spaces, they're going to be used and repurposed for some additional office spaces upstairs. So we are moving those 3 areas. So small amount of work, but it does impact different things. So it's not just in isolation where it's just a bottom floor shut off. It's not that easy, unfortunately.
Jackie, I wasn't sure if you had anything to add on to that. Okay. Anyone else? Nikki?
Just a thought, I don't know, but whomever the realtor was, even if RDO didn't realize because they'd been grandfathered in, would that be a responsibility of a realtor to be familiar enough with commercial property to say, hey, we need to talk about these things, or?
I think we
I don't
need to
know.
remember there wasn't a realtor used in this transaction.
Okay. And I don't want to hold it up for that, but I'm just saying, if we'd approve it, could we go back to?
So it seems like where we are right now is we need to decide on this item that is in front of us, and that we won't be able to move forward with even opening up that building if this work is going to need to be done. And we have made a commitment for this building space, from what I'm hearing from this other discussion about whose responsibility here or there regarding say, for example, the handicap accessibility for the bathroom. I would just put that to, my suggestion would be put it to administration for some continued thought and maybe guidance, and come back to us with information.
And I just want to recognize, this isn't an easy conversation for administration to bring to the board as well. Please know that we, by Century Code, we do go through a bidding process. We look at our criteria and look at the lowest bids possible too. The Explorer Academy did come under bid for some areas too. Sometimes the projections, I mean, this is one of those times where it doesn't always happen, but the market's different right now, and we know, and not specific to this project, but lumber's up, timber, metal's up. I mean, there's just different things when we go to bid, but we are doing our due diligence. It's never our goal to bring something that went above the bid process, but last couple of projects went under, and this is just one of those times where it didn't.
Brian?
Well, I can share your sympathies with that, because in Rossalt, where we just opened up our bids, they came over 480,000 over bid, so things are different.
All right, I don't see any other hands up. Anne Marie, would you please call the roll?
Newman?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Benson?
No.
Gullickson?
Yes.
Holden?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Brian Nelson?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes, motion passes. Item C, RDO Building Special Assessments, Memo 103, Dr. Gandhi and Jackie Gap.
This memo is just a request to pay off the special assessments on the RDO building from our special assessment fund. I believe the memo will show you that we have the capacity to be able to do that, and so we wouldn't be paying the interest on it down the road.
Is there a motion for approval? Jim?
I move that we approve the full payment of the outstanding special assessment balance on the property located at 700 7th Street South.
Is there a second?
Second.
By Tracy, all right. Any questions or discussion on Memo 103? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Paulson?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
Gullickson?
Yes.
Holden?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Brian Nelson?
Yes.
Newman?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes, motion passes. Item D, District Office Lease Options, Memo 104, Dr. Gandhi and Jackie Gap.
It's a fun show today. This business item is really requesting the ability for administration to work with our commercial real estate agent to list the current building, not just for sale, which is what it's listed as right now, but for lease as well. A presentation was made by our real estate company that we're working with to the planning committee, talking about opportunities, especially with us being a downtown location. If we want to be able to invest, or if we want to be able to market towards investors, and there are investors that have maybe expressed some desire to look at this property, a lease option would be another route to go. So it would not eliminate our property for sale, but in addition to selling it, also considering leasing it as well. And there are a wide variety of different options of what that could look like. That can include us being a landlord, but also options that wouldn't include us being a landlord. If we were to lease it, the realtor could work with getting an investor and a tenant at the same time, if that's something to consider as well.
Is there a motion to move forward? Jim?
I'm going to move that we approve the administration to list the property located at 415 4th Street North for both lease and in addition for sale, and execute a lease listing with Archer Commercial Real Estate.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Seth. Any questions or discussion? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Benson?
Yes.
Gullickson?
Yes.
Holden?
Yes.
Johnson? Brian Nelson?
Yes.
Newman?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes, motion passes. Item E, Davies Artificial Turf, Memo 105. Jim, would you like to kick this off?
I sure will. I think everybody's aware of the fact that the staff over at Davies and some parents over at Davies have been busy for quite some time trying to raise enough money to put artificial turf in on their football/soccer field. And I know Troy is probably sitting in the back wanting to say, we did it, because they did. They hit their goal. So it is in front of us today to approve moving forward with a contract to put the artificial turf in. I think the goal is to have it ready by next fall. I think that's the goal, anyway.
Seth?
I move that the board approve the official turf project at Davies High School under the guidelines outlined above.
Second.
All right, motion by Seth, seconded by Jim. Any discussion? Jackie?
I know Mr. Cody is here. I just would like to mention we are still waiting on a contract for the donor who has pledged their payment. And so I think it'd be in the best interest of the district to not sign the contract until we have that contract for the pledge in hand. So I know I believe they're working on it, or the committee is working on getting that. So once that is finalized, I believe we have everything in place to sign the contract.
Good advice. Thank you, Jack. Dr. Newman, and then David.
Thank you. I just wanted to commend all of the parents and families that really put this effort forward. It has been a long time coming, and this is a very exciting day. And I also want to thank the community members that pledged pretty significant amounts to make this happen. So our other two high schools have this type of turf, and I'm excited for Davies to get this.
David?
I'm sure this is probably just my faulty memory, but I don't recall us going through this process with either north or south. Was it on the consent agenda at that time? I don't remember us approving the.
I would have to look back for South High. That was a very different situation than the North and Davies have gone through. But for North High, we did have a similar memo come before the board for approval.
Yeah, I vaguely recall that too, but I know they were both financed through, donations and fundraising efforts of various kinds. Anne Marie, did you have your hand up for some
I was just going to
history?
support what Jackie said. For the North High, it came to, I want to say it was, I've looked at it a couple times, but it was either May or June of 2019.
Yes, nice work. All of our high schools will, if we go forward with this, have some turf that's going to be lasting for many, many years. So any discussions, any other discussion or questions? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Gullickson?
Yes.
Holden?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Brian Nelson?
Yes.
Newman?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes, motion passes. Okay, item F, Career Workforce Academy Operational Agreement, Memo 106, Dr. Gandhi and Jackie Gabb.
I believe the board and our community has been engaged in conversations with the Career Workforce Academy, so from some extensive, for the last couple of years, and actually even predates me. We've had a lot of conversations around the brick and mortar, and one of the things that our district has always said and shared is that although that might not be an opportunity that we could support administratively or even as a board, we understand the shared cost of sharing the operational expenses as well as a district. So the Career Workforce Academy has had a team work on the operational expenses. That information is included in your board packet. It is modeled based off of what's happening in Bismarck with their Career Workforce Academy as well. So the ask is a resolution or a pledge, whatever we want to call it, that we would commit to the operational expenses for $100,000 a year, up to 10 years, which would be up to a third of the expenses, understanding that West Fargo has passed a similar resolution with their Board of Education as well, and NDSCS would have they would have a contribution for their students that would potentially utilize that facility as well. Dr. Jonas is available here as well if board members have any questions around the programming, around that project, where we are with that project as well. Jackie's also been working with a team of business managers around calculating the operational expenses and how we got to that number as well. And I've been part of some of those conversations as well.
Any questions? Discussion? Okay, Emery.
There's not a motion on the floor.
I think you need a motion here.
Sorry, I was trying to move on so badly. Jim?
I move that the district commit to an annual contribution for a 10-year period for 1/3 of the increased operational expenses over the present North Dakota State School of Science site, not to exceed $100,000 annually.
Who would like to second?
Second.
All right, Tracy, thank you. Any discussion? Questions? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Dr. Gandhi, I think with your elaborate explanation of that memo, I just thought of it as a motion, but I realize that you're qualified in many, many ways, but not to make a motion for this board, so.
Well, thank you. And Dr. Jonas, thank you for joining us too. Just know that Dr. Jonas is always available for questions as our community continues conversations around the Career Workforce Academy. So I'm very grateful for the board's support as well, but know that she's always there as a resource too. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. COVID-19 Staff Appreciation Memo 107. Jim?
Several months ago, David brought to the planning committee a request to consider doing something to let our staff know that we really appreciate all they've been doing since COVID became reality for the district. And what you have before you is what planning is recommending for the board's consideration. Basically, all full-time employees that are actively employed with the district at this point in time and were employed as of January 21st or January 1st of 2021 would receive $300 if they're a full-time employee, or a pro rata amount for our part-time employees. There's approximately 2,050 people that would be impacted by this appreciation, and the estimated cost, including the benefits that would go with it, Social Security, so on and so forth, is approximately $625,000. And I think the thinking currently is that we'll actually be using our fund balance, because obviously this is not in the current operating budget. So if we approve this, we're really letting the business manager know we expect to see the fund balance used for that $625,000. With that, I'll make a motion, unless David wanted to.
No, that's fine.
I move that we authorize administration to provide a one-time payment through the general fund of $300 to eligible employees as presented in Memo 107, in appreciation for the efforts made to transition to the new instructional models and to adapt to the changing guidance by the state and local healthcare officials in response to COVID-19 in the past as well as the future.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Nikki. Any discussion? David?
Should that motion be amended to, so that it's understood that the 300 is for full-time and it will be prorated for anything less than a full-time employee?
It references Memo 107 in the motion, and if you read 107, it clearly states that.
I think that makes it clear, unless, David, you're okay with that? Okay,
I just wanted a clear understanding.
all right. Any other questions or discussion regarding Memo 107? All right, Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Okay, on to board reports. Nikki, would you like to start?
Wanted to give a shout out. I'm liaison to the FPS Foundation, and they had a very successful Giving Hearts Day. Reviewed financial investment and strategies. They're doing well. They continue to raise more, even in these tricky times, so that they can keep doing all the great work that they're doing. They received an unexpected large donation from Bethel Church, which was a really nice blessing to be able to have. They raised just shy of $115,000, I believe, if I have that number right. And what a day. There were over 500 nonprofits involved. And that's about all I have for today.
Thank you, Nikki. Brian?
Couple of things. Just, we've had a couple of meetings with the calendar committee. Thanks for your guidance yesterday at the work session. I was all set to go to my schools on Thursday and Friday of this week, but Dr. Gandhi made some changes there, so we'll reschedule those, and I look forward to going. I really do. I can't wait. I'm excited. I was disappointed, but that's it.
Save the good stuff for another day. Yep. Jim?
Planning met since we last had a board meeting. I think we covered most of what happened at planning in our business section. One area that was not on today's discussions is, and I'm going to get this wrong, I'm pretty sure, but Jackie will correct me. We have an operating system, I think it's called something like ERP, and we are going to need to change it because it's no longer really being supported, and we're going to probably shift to infinite visions, and that will ultimately be a cost probably in the next school year of anywhere from $600,000 to $800,000, so more to come on that, I'm sure. We also had an SEEC board meeting since our last meeting. Got an update on the North Dakota Health Insurance Trust, which the SEEC is really being the fiscal agent for. It'll be hopefully a revenue generator for us, but it is up and running as of today. We've got a couple of school districts and a lot of political subdivisions in it currently, but I suspect a year from now we'll see quite a few more school districts because that's really the focus of it. We also took a look at our budget projections for the coming year and talked about our superintendent evaluation process for the SEEC. And that's it.
Thank you, Jim. David?
Since our last meeting, the negotiations committee has met. That was on the 4th of March. All members were present. And we've scheduled our next committee meeting for April 1st. And that's not fooling.
Thank you, David. Jennifer?
I don't think I have anything else to report tonight.
All right, Seth?
President Knutson, you are correct. I do have more to report than I did last meeting. So, on the 24th of February, I had the CTE Board and Advisory Council meeting. On the 2nd, I had a visit to CBE and had a good conversation with Brad, and the lights of retirement are getting brighter for him. And then on the 3rd, I had a visit at Lincoln and had a good conversation with Megan there. Also that day on the 3rd, I had a visit with Ed Clapp, and once again had a good visit with Jennifer. Also it was pretty funny. We were walking the halls, and the 3rd grader came and asked her who I was, and she was trying to explain that I was a board member to him, and he didn't quite get it, and he asked me if I was the owner of the school. And I tried to explain to him that we all own the school, but I don't think public works are quite on the 3rd grade agenda, so he didn't quite get it, and ran off and had fun. So, and then obviously work session yesterday. So, yeah, thanks.
Nice, thank you. Tracy?
Not much for me. We had our COVID-19 instructional plan committee meeting yesterday. As you guys know, I did attend a 1-hour-long webinar out of UCSF about COVID vaccinations and the impact on schools and in-person learning, which, like it or not, I shared with Dr. Gandhi. Sorry about that. And I continue to follow just all of the trials and data coming out about children under the age of 18, particularly the age of 16, being vaccinated. And I'm also sharing with people. So, and I just wanted to take this moment to really commend, I sit on the Fargo Cass Public Health Board through this assignment, and they are just doing such a phenomenal job with their vaccination effort in our community, and I just wanted to publicly thank them. They are working tirelessly to get our community vaccinated, and I think North Dakota is doing this better than most states in our country, and I'm extremely proud of the work they do. So, thank you, Fargo Cass Public Health.
Thank you, Tracy. The president's schedule calendar is in front of you. There's some homework due tomorrow for any of us. I need to work on getting mine turned in, so anyone else, please do that. The Native American Commission was going to meet in March, but that meeting was canceled. I wanted to just talk a tish bit about the town hall meetings that were held. The first ones, the beginning here, right away of March, that we as board members will rotate as far as who participates in those meetings, and so I was in on the first 2 meetings, and Rupak, I know you'll add in a little bit here, I think, after to fill in, but there were some questions at the end. But basically at the beginning, I gave a welcome and thanked people for participating, and encouraged open dialogue and a trusting process and being a safe space to share information and ask questions and that kind of a thing. We've talked about that here as a board before and at the CEA meeting too. And so there were just a few comments that were specifically directed towards the board that I just thought I'd let you know what they were in relation to. One of them was regarding the mask mandate in the bill in the North Dakota legislature, lifting that, and just voicing concern about that and where we were as a school board on that. And we talked about that earlier when Robin Nelson provided her report and explanation in terms of kind of where we've been, but Dr. Gandhi and I both talked about that we won't be not visible after now once crossover passes, and the deep concern about, if we don't have the ability to issue masks, we just won't be able to be, in school. And I talked about the crossover meeting, the Zoom meeting that we had with our legislators to reinforce that we had that dialogue then too, and the concern there. And so then another question, I think the other 2 others tied into negotiations. One question, it was in regard to the time frame for negotiations. The question was this: why did and this is the question, I'm not saying this is my response back or at all our position, but the question was, why did the Fargo Public Schools Board choose to spearhead a bill limiting the time frame for contract negotiations rather than, as past mediation panel recommendations has suggested, work with the local bargaining entity, establish a timeline as a ground rule? Why take it statewide to solve a local problem through collaboration? And the board did not all seem in agreement of the bill's support. So we've talked about this a little bit before as a board. And in terms of our individual positionings and in terms of board support, we talked about that earlier today. We talked about that if we have an individual opinion on something, that's to come not from a school board address or, that's our own individual emails or contact information that we would be using if we're doing that. I talked about that that is a board support, a committee support for that, the stance on that bill, and that it's not only Fargo School District that is an advocate for that bill. There were many others testifying in favor of that bill, including other school districts and the School Boards Association. So that was my in the nutshell, my comment there. Did talk about, and Dr. Gandhi can touch on a little bit more if necessary, some of the issues that we and other districts run into when we don't have a timely settlement on a contract agreement. and some of the things that are held back in terms of administration being able to, move forward with planning for the school year. And then another question that tied into that was in regard to like being able to continue to move through the negotiations process, basically in a timely manner, and talking about how might this change for the upcoming negotiation cycle, asked about the need that in the past the board has had to, meet every 2 weeks to address issues that come up at those joint FEA and board negotiations committee meetings. And so I mentioned that I'd be willing to call a special meeting whenever's needed if we need to be able to move things along. I also encouraged trust, respect, grace, that we enter into this process just with that. Also suggesting that possibly during the time when negotiations, or when both groups discuss the ground rules, that there's a time for us to, maybe it's step back and kind of, again, use that grace and trust and respect, and being flexible and thinking about what some of the ground rules might come from both parties, and then working to agree on those. So hopefully I represented the board well. And Dr. Gandhi, anything to add?
Nothing else to add. Administration will be putting out in this Thursday's staff newsletter just a summary of the first town hall meetings and the topics covered, and some of the conversation points as well.
Okay, with nothing else, that takes us to the end of the agenda, and it is 7:52 p.m. and we're adjourned. The next meeting is March 23rd. Thank you.